Orc, the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests.
Episode 137, Timothy the Gallant Knight. Welcome to Sidekicks and Side Quests, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps to put humans back into humanity and breathe life into your campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. That's right, we're building a world, one character at a time. I am your host, Kurt Krenwelge, the Bardic Paladin, and I'll be joining Jade's table in the levitating platter. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests, the best unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast, in my humbly biased opinion. I've got an amazing guest for you this week, but before we get to my guest, I gotta leave you in suspense with the ad read. This episode is brought to you by Plus One EXP and their brand new RPG Zine Club. Zine Club is a monthly membership subscription service featuring fresh zines from emerging and expanding creators across the globe. It's our way of inviting GMs, players, and zine lovers everywhere to invest more intentionally in the creative community. It's crowdsourced support without crowdfunding. So this service offers monthly releases that they put out in two 20 to 44 page saddle stitch zines. 3 different flavors. Take your pick from story zines, adventure zines, and all of the zines. You can pick your format of print and digital, or just get digital only for your favorite titles. Join the Clubhouse Discord section of the Plus One EXP community on Discord. Get the best prices guaranteed from your subscription that you're going to get each month. You get a private subscription portal where you can manage your subscription, add products, or change your information. Change your frequency monthly, every other month, something else. You pick how often you want these new titles to arrive. You only get what you want. And if you miss a month, why, you can always go back and add a title to your recent month's order. Get an annual surprise each February after your first anniversary. Get access to special content with interviews, how to play videos, special content for Zine Club titles. Get a free pizza if you fill out one of the RPG Zine Club passports, or redeem it for a free pizza at events where Tony is present himself. You're going to get access to new and known designers, the best voices from across the RPG design community. And know that Plus One EXP and RPG Zine Club curate their zines based on community interest and feedback to help you discover your new favorite creators. There's a DIE focus because Plus One is committed to championing diversity, inclusion, and equity in their projects. Creators with diverse experiences make our community better. So Zine Club prioritizes creating equity for all of our creators. And it's more than a purchase. Your subscriptions will let us invest more heavily in our print partners and provide them with potentially life-changing support by consolidating scores or hundreds of purchases as the club grows. So, if you want to learn more, I would recommend that you go to the website rpgzine.club, again, rpgzine.club, and if you want, go to plus1exp.com, and when you're buying stuff on that site, beard balms or lip balms or beard RPGs or whatnot, and you need a discount code at checkout, be sure to use the code RANDOLPH, RANDOLPH, at checkout and get some savings on your purchase at no extra cost to you. Again, website is plus1exp.com, and the Zine Club website is rpgzine.club. All right, and without further ado, I turn the microphone over to my guest, and I ask, hello, mystery contestant. Would you care to introduce yourself? Tell us who it is that you are, and what is it that you do?
Hello, my name is Jade. I would describe myself as a forever student. I don't do much other than work and explore the universe and try to consume as much of everything as I possibly can.
So you're a perfect listener of the podcast then. So you'll just listen to all 130 some odd episodes and then be able to regurgitate them ad nauseum.
I will try.
No, no, no. I won't force anyone to sit down and listen to this podcast. It's just meant to be a good resource to help people out with their games and such. So, but it's good to know. Yeah. So forever student of the world. We like those people. Being able to just perpetually learn, be students of life. Because I think the band Operation Ivy said it best. All I know is that I don't know. All I know is that I don't know nothing. And I feel like I live that every day, especially with a 3-year-old in my house. So, perfect. So awesome to hear. And we both know each other because you are friends with our previous guest of the show, Carla.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah. And so Carla was gracious enough to be like, hey, you should speak with my friend Jade. She's awesome. And I was like, perfect. The more, the merrier. As we keep rolling along with this show, I feel it's a dead giveaway, but do you currently, or have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons before?
I played D&D years and years and years ago with a small group of friends in high school, and we did a small series of one-shots where none of us knew anything about the game and none of us knew at all what we were doing. We had pre-made character sheets and a pre-made campaign, which we completely ignored in favor for literal wild goose chases. And then our DM was an exchange student from Germany. And so he moved back home and we never spoke we never spoke ever again.
Aw.
And so since then, I've just been consuming D&D knowledge as much as I possibly can, which is crazy because I've never actually read the player handbook. I've never read the player handbook. I just love like homebrew content.
Okay.
And I love I was intrigued by the world building and the endless possibilities and quite genuinely the chaos that generally ensues in campaigns. And that's what I did until a couple years ago or a year ago when Baldur's Gate 3 came out. And my best friend has played the other Baldur's Gate games, and he was like, you would love this. So he introduced me to Baldur's Gate, and I ate it up until the end of Act 2, and then I did that thing where I dropped off the face of the planet regarding my 3, 4, 5, 7 unfinished games. And with that that reintroduction into D&D, the group of friends that I have currently decided that they wanted to play a game. And I have now been seated as the forever DM, the forever DM for them. And I'm currently crafting my own campaign, which again, as somebody who's like only just now reading the manuals, is a terrifying experience.
Well, hopefully my podcast and a great number of other actual plays and YouTubers out there will convince you otherwise and really lift the curtain aside to let you know, like, hey, we're all just making it up as we go along anyway. I'm quite reminded of the character of Captain Barbossa, played by Jeffrey Rush in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. He's referring to the Pirates Code, but I think it applies to D&D as well when he's like, they're more guidelines than what you call actual rules. So that's really what D&D is all about. Like, hopefully everyone's agreeing to the same guidelines and style of play and, what is and is not permissible in their games and all that. But yeah, no, so that's amazing that you're going to be here on this show today. We're going to make a character. Hopefully you're going to drop them in this first adventure or at some point down the road, you seed them in the game, and then maybe your players will take the bait and they'll go figure out who we're going to meet today. But certainly you were sharing that, I played with a German exchange student. The first thing that I was thinking of was like, das is nicht good, that, he up and left to Germany after he was done. Well, hopefully your friend will hear you on this podcast and he'll be like, you know what? Maybe I do need to finish that game with those friends I made back in America. There are plenty of digital tools that are out there to be able to do so, certainly.
One can only hope.
And so, as this podcast is so aptly named, we like to ask the questions about the others, the NPCs, the little guys, the best supporting Oscar categories, if you will. So, for the first one of these questions, who happens to be your favorite sidekick or NPC character, whether they be from RPG, video game, movie, film, television, literature, etc.? And why is this character your favorite sidekick or your favorite NPC?
When I was thinking about these questions, my immediate answer was Cicero from Skyrim. Not because he's good, but not because he's good, but because he's absolutely insane. And I love that. But I think I'm not sure if you would qualify him as a sidekick per se, but I am absolutely like in love with Jackie from Cyberpunk. I don't know if you're familiar with the game.
I have not played it, but I mean, I know of it, certainly.
Okay, so Jackie is a character, and I can't spoil a whole lot for people who haven't played, but Jackie is a
Sure.
character that that your character meets day one, and because the game drops you in medias rex. It drops you in the middle of a story. You're on the way to do something, or you're making a deal of some sort, and Jackie is usually like a middleman or someone that you meet along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And through the chunk of the story that made me fall in love with him, you and him become friends, and things happen, and you like there's family and people that he loves that you get involved with, and it's absolutely amazing. But I think the phrase that best sums it up, because like crime is such a big thing in Cyberpunk, that it's like even bad men love their mamas. And he is such an amazing golden retriever type personality that he was, oh, I can't spoil that, never mind. But he was definitely a favorite of mine.
Okay. Well, I was going to say you totally could, and I could very humorously add a bleep over what you're saying. Anyone reading the transcripts would be able to know what you're saying, but then, then everyone else in the podcast would just hear a tone.
That's fair. Okay, so for everyone watching or listening to the video, good luck with the game. For everyone who's reading the transcript, you only know Jackie for a very short amount of time because
Awesome. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that you love Jackie. So, and to go along with our question about sidekicks, we like to hear about side quests as well. So, what happens to be your favorite side quest or B plot element, whether it be from video game, RPG, movie, film, television, literature, etc., and why is this side quest or B plot element your favorite?
I think my favorite, I guess, minor story arc in a video game, going back to Skyrim, is the Thieves Guild. The whole Thieves Guild quest line it holds such a special place in my heart. Skyrim was the first game that I ever played, and the world and the history and the NPCs are really beautifully fleshed out. And I think it was the found family aspect of that quest line that really made me fall in love. And the thing that kept me in love is it gave me an alternative way to explore the world, because you pick up little pieces of lore about characters that in gameplay only have like one or two pre-recorded lines of dialogue, but these little quest lines give you so much insight into the types of people that they are.
You might find this hard to believe, but I was in college when Skyrim came out, and I totally had friends like you talked about with Baldur's Gate 3 who like disappeared off the face of the earth. I have classmates that, from my college days that absolutely happened to, and roommates and stuff like that. But I never have actually played Skyrim, but from all that I've ever read, it's like, yeah, they really went the extra mile with every NPC in that game, that literally you could just tail an NPC and they have like a whole day that they like go on about, and it may vary from like different days. So it's not like, oh, this is the cycle they do. It's like, oh, on this day, this person's going to go here to this location and then come back. and then maybe the next day they go do something else. And so
Mhm.
so for all the goofy Bethesda bugs and putting baskets over people's heads while you rob them blind, there's still the beauty in all their little characters in the world, where you're like, oh, like people like live here and they breathe, and there's like, it's not just ones and zeros. It's like these are little peoples.
Mhm. Kurt, it's a sin that you've never played.
Well, I haven't
It's an
played
absolute
Baldur's Gate
sin.
3 yet either, but that's only because I have an original Xbox One, so I don't have the XS, and I don't have a super duper gaming computer to be able to run it. And as I said, I have a 3-year-old, so like, when am I going to have the time to play Baldur's Gate 3?
There is always time for there's always time for Baldur's Gate, Kurt.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no,
Just
that's
like
true.
there's always room for dessert.
There's always, yep, that's true. Someone should put that on a T-shirt and sell it and make a bunch of money, I suppose.
Maybe it'll be me. Who
Yeah,
knows?
I'm not above giving away ideas to other people to profit off of. So, and then the way we end or round out the personal interview section of the podcast episode, Jade, what are you passionate about and why?
Ooh. Other than everything, I'm becoming a true jack of all trades. Currently, I am studying the occult, and it is what fuels me. And by occult, I more so mean, I guess maybe metaphysical is a better word. But I practice what I would deem like alternative spirituality, and paganism and polytheism. And diving headfirst into the study of that has really brought me a lot of joy and a lot of peace and a lot of excitement about the world around me. And I read tarot and I love astrology. And it consumes my every waking moment, Kurt.
Well, hopefully you weren't too off put by our most recent episode we had with Steinway and Mabel, because
Mhm.
Steinway was the tween who was into astrology, but he's a tween, so he doesn't quite have it nailed down. So,
I actually loved that episode.
oh, okay, well, very good. Okay, so we didn't totally scare you away or prompt you to like negative review bomb the podcast. So we're glad and we're hopeful for that, certainly. Before we started the call, you joked about like how you and Carla were seen as like twins, like
Mhm.
twins separated at birth. Are you also someone who is also Filipino as well?
I am not. I am Chinese, but I was adopted when I was very young, so I did not grow up with even like an inkling of the same kind of history
Mm-hmm.
that somebody would have if they were raised in a Chinese culture or raised in the same culture that I would have been raised in. So everything that I have ever like loved for myself or believed, um, is something that I've had to build like brick by brick.
Mm. Okay, so the reason how I was leading up to that, or asking, was, just trying to understand. You said that you have this passion for. Is it more of
Mhm.
like like you were saying, you're building it brick by brick? So is this kind of like your way of like discovering your, like cultural sort of like heritage that exists? Is that what it more is to understand and such?
I honestly wouldn't say that particularly. The specific brand of polytheism and paganism that I uh, subscribe to, I suppose,
Hmm.
is more eclectic. It's more, for me, it's more based in Norse mythology and the Norse pantheon. That's what's really, really called to me personally.
Mm.
The eternal study is more about me discovering my place in the world, because the place that I was given does not particularly resonate with me. The gods of my parents and the gods of my grandparents is not something that resonates with me very deeply. So it's been just this journey my entire life of figuring out who exactly I am and where exactly I belong, because the places that I was told I should belong, I really don't feel like I do. Carla and I are the same person because we're both crazy.
Well, we love Carla on this podcast. We think Carla's great, so we love you too.
Mhm.
And
Thanks.
yes, well, I mean, being open and sharing. I mean, I think it's no secret that, like, our second ever parlays at the platter we did was on Tolkien, Catholicism, and D&D, and the intersection of all that. Because
Mhm.
surprise, surprise, The Lord of the Rings is a very Catholic work, and I'm a very Catholic individual. And,
Really?
so it's not meant to be like it's not meant to be like a pagan has revealed himself. I have to do the old, and now I'm blanking on the name of the particular saint that went to the tree and was like, oh, this tree is your god. Let me cut it down, in a show of religious dominance. So like,
Mhm.
that's not my nature or my wanting to just understand. So it's like I'm just trying to understand Jade and figure out what she's passionate about and how I can relate to you as a human, as a fellow human being, a fellow student of life and learning. And whatever I can do to love you and support you and help you grow as a person, like, that's what this family friendly D&D-esque sort of podcast is all about. So, that's the beauty of this place, I think. All right. Well, I feel like we've done an amazing journey here in the personal interview section. I know you're all waiting for figuring out what kind of character we're going to make, so I won't delay any further. And let's head into some NPC creation. And NPC creation is brought to you by you, the podcast audience, and our patrons from Patreon. But of course, that all to say is that we lift our drinks, and we raise a toast to our queen of the Patreon, Goblin Katie, aka Katie Downey, as well as our other wealthy patrons, Anson Jablinski and good old mom and dad Krenwelgi. We say cheers. All these folks donated a level where they get a shout out on every episode of the podcast. And all the folks I mentioned as well happen to be at least the wealthy level tier, which means they get to introduce an element of chance to our random table. So we might get to hear some of their responses used here today. So if you want to learn more about our Patreon, as well as the Ko-fi, that's like, I mean, I guess it's Patreon adjacent. Surprise, I have a Ko-fi too. So if you don't want to do a Patreon, that's cool. I have Ko-fi information. You can go on the podcast website to check that out, where you can also find information about the Patreon. You can find out information about the Patreon in the show notes below, or just go directly to patreon.com/sidekicks and side quests to learn more about the accommodations that we have awaiting for you inside the levitating platter. Help us to grow and expand our operations in this demi-plane and worlds beyond. All right, so we made it through that whole song and dance, and now we're here. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we going the path of random, or do you have some sort of idea and we're going to like discover who our character is through the process of the questions?
I would really love to do a random roll. I would really love to really test myself on my ability to improvise.
Okay, all right, excellent. So then we're gonna have the senior and the greenhorn working together in collaboration to form this NPC through the series of the random dice rolls that we get here today. We're gonna let the tables do the talking. So for the first question that we have here, what's going to be the name of our character? We're going to get a D20 and we're going to roll that and see what we get. Whether you have your dice at the ready, virtual or otherwise, and we will see what character that we get.
Okay. It's a 20.
Oh, there we
nat
go.
20.
A nat 20 on your first roll on this podcast. I think
Hey.
you are off to a great start. And your answer was provided by our Patreon supporter, my dad, Wayne Krenwelgi. Timothy.
Timothy, I love that.
They call me Tim. If you you say you know everything or you're a student of everything, do you know the reference?
I do not.
Ooh,
Oh,
that would be Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I love Monty Python. I don't know that reference though.
That's near the
Sorry.
end of the Holy Grail movie when they enchant Tim. They recruit Tim Tim the sorcerer, Tim the enchanter, to come along for the adventure.
Oh man.
And the fun movie trivia I know of that is that John Cleese like literally forgot his line and just left it hanging. And then they were like, well, we love that. We're just going to leave that in the movie. Where he's like, some call me Tim. And then they were like, sure, Tim the Enchanter. A very D&D sort of move anyway. So there you go. So Timothy. Okay. Now the next dice roll we get to do is for the ancestry of our character. So this is going to be a 2d10 or a d100 roll. And we've got everything in here. So if there's something in here that you're like, oh man, I don't know about that, we're always free to re-roll, of course. 2d10s, let's get a d100 roll and see what kind of ancestry, species, racial background our Timothy is going to be today.
Okay, so a 2d10, that's rolling a d10 twice, right?
Yes.
I clearly know what I'm doing. Okay. So our first number is 10.
All right. So, okay, 1 or 0, I guess. Okay.
Okay, and then our next one is a 2.
Okay. So it sounds like, okay, so with the 10 and a 2, that could either, well, I mean, I guess it would be 12. Does that sound plausible to you?
I think that's how the math works.
I think that's how the math works too. Okay. All right. So 12 is it's dwarf time. So you have your pick. So obviously I'm still using the 2014 D&D 5e rules. I know 2024 rules have come out. So if you're more comfortable using those, of course, listeners out there, you could do whatever. But I certainly am comfortable with the 2014 version, and I've worked everything out. So here we go. We've got mountain or hill dwarf. You've got duergar, which are the Underdark dwarf variants. We've got the Azer, which are the fire dwarves, and then I have a number of other homebrew dwarven sub ancestries that I've created as well. So dwarf is the category we're working with today. So what kind of dwarf are you interested for Timothy to be? And is there some sort of like dwarven surname that you're already thinking of, like Timothy? Usually it's some sort of compounded last name like Bronze Bottom or Ale Chugger or, whatever it's going to be.
Ooh, that's a hard one. I think that I kind of like the idea of him being how do you say them? A dragar? The Underdark?
Duergar? Yeah, which I know
Yeah, the Duergar, yeah.
they are in Skyrim, but they're like the undead skeletons you'd find in the caves or whatever. I have watched my wife play Skyrim, so I at least know like Duergar like in that, but in D&D terms, Duergar are the Underdark dwarf variants.
I do like that. That sounds fun. I have no idea about character names are my weakness, to be completely honest. So I don't know anything about dwarven names.
Well, you know what?
It's just Tim.
Yeah, just Timothy. Yeah. Well, I know I will make it no secret for me, expert, quote unquote, expert DM tip. I really like the website Fantasy Name Generator. They've got all kinds of great names. It's a great database. So if I'm ever in the need for a name, I'll just go on there and refresh it a couple times and be like, that looks like a good name. So I might suggest using that if you want to look for a good surname. But for now, we just know the Duergar known as Timothy. We could have a very interesting story of maybe why he goes by Timothy. Okay, so we know the ancestry. Now we need to figure out what's going to be the job or role in society that Timothy has. We will roll just a regular D10 to figure out what his job or his occupation is going to be.
A 4.
4. Okay, your answer was provided by previous guest Nolan Page, whetstone cutter.
A whetstone cutter.
Yes. So if I had to venture a guess and not totally, speak out of turn off the cuff, it sounds like someone who like makes whetstones.
I guess so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, just a quick Google search has a number of table saws that have come up, but let's see, stone cutter, saws, whetstone cutter. Yeah. So my guess would be this totally would fit for someone who lives in the Underdark or underground and is like, oh yeah, so Timothy's job, he's the guy who makes all the whetstones that everyone uses to be able to sharpen their blades. So that seems like a pretty stable profession to be in. Everyone needs whetstones to sharpen their blades, so never never a dull moment in that profession. So
Wow, I'm snapping for
yeah,
your pun. Snap, snap, snap.
dad jokes for days. Okay, so we know the name, we know the ancestry, we know the occupation. Now we need to figure out what's the age range. What's like, how old are we picturing our Timothy to be? Let's roll a D8 to get the category.
Let me see. I have one of those. Okay. A 2.
A 2. Okay, teenager. Are you okay with a teenage duergar named Timothy?
I think so. That's interesting.
Okay.
I wonder how long he's been a whetstone cutter.
Yeah. So with these details in mind, as we are reminiscing on them, so we've got Timothy, we've got duergar, we've got whetstone cutter, who's a teenager. So my mind goes to apprentice or something like that. But with these details in mind, when you put them all together, can you paint the physical picture? Can you give us a physical appearance, a physical description of how we're going to picture Timothy?
Oh, the picture that I have in my mind is he's oh my God, Kurt, I was about to be like, he's short. Okay, so
He is a dwargar. I mean, you wouldn't be
he is
lying.
he's short. He's a short little dwarf. And he is the way that I'm picturing him is he's this really dark purple. Because I know that there's like, a range, but he's a really dark purple and he has this really long, very like just exited puberty, like pimple face with the eyes that are a little too big for his head. His eyes a little bit too big for his head. And he's probably very I don't want to say green looking because he's purple, but he's probably very green looking. He probably still kind of looks like he's not been worn down by like years of labor. Like he's very soft. He's got soft hands. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. The other dwargar give him a hard time. He's like, I'm just doing my job. I'm new at this. And they're just like, you haven't been working the mines or fighting the drow or other beasties that live here in the Underdark like us, kid. And he's just like,
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
just doing what I'm doing.
Like, I'm so sorry, but also, what am I doing?
Right, just the eternal teenage angst of no one understands me, but then also I have no idea what I'm doing, which some of us get into our 30s and we're still asking ourselves, what is it that we're doing? So,
Isn't that the truth?
okay. So fresh out of the teenage acne stage. I don't know actually when Dwargar start their beards and stuff like that. And I know usually the Dwargar, well, in 4th edition I remember them having like spines and stuff growing out of their beards. And I don't believe that's the case in 5th edition anymore. But do you imagine that he's got like a little bit of like a tiny beard thing going on, or is he
I
like wispy or patchy?
Oh man, Timothy would hate me. I imagine he's got like 3 or 4 little like wiry hairs just like sticking out of his chin.
Mm.
That is it. And nobody at this a whetstone cutting place, wherever they go to cut whetstones, like nobody takes him seriously. They're all
Mm.
just like, you don't know anything and you're too young to be knowing. You're too young to be here. You're too young to know anything. And Oh, I bet he's clumsy. I think he's clumsy.
Oh, okay. Do you want to go ahead and kind of start rolling into the 3 adjectives that you think describe Timothy?
Oh, we can. I'm sorry. I got ahead of
No,
myself.
you're
Didn't I?
fine. No, this is the juice, the secret of this podcast is that as we're talking and discussing and figuring out these like little pieces of details about our NPCs that we make is like we start learning so much about not only them as characters, but we learn about the world in which they live, the context that they're in, and we start drawing all these interesting inferences and conclusions. So clumsy.
Exciting.
Okay, you're thinking maybe
Okay.
Timothy, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think I don't want to say simple, but he's very clumsy. He's a little slow.
Mm.
I wonder if he has any dreams and ambitions. I think maybe he's a little bit of a dreamer, and that's why he's a little bit not connected with the physical world, which is not a good trait to have when what are you doing? Cutting whetstones.
Right. Yeah. You have to be very observant. You don't want to accidentally, lop off a finger or an arm or a leg or something like that. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm just picturing him sitting in his little factory and his what do they call him? Not because he's an apprentice, like a mentor. There's a word for those. His little journeyman whetstone cutter that's watching over his work is yelling at him, and he just takes this big deep breath, and then he starts to sing about like what it's like in the world above.
Mm. Okay, well now that's another Monty Python reference of the prince who's just like, I just want to sing, and the dad keeps coming in saying, no singing whatsoever.
I love the dad. The dad has his priorities in order. You
Mhm.
know what I'm talking about.
Yes, huge tracts of land.
Tracks of land.
Yes.
I was too young to understand that reference the first time that I watched that movie.
Mm.
And as an adult, I asked myself constantly why my father showed that to me. He thought it was funny. I had no idea what was going on.
Okay. Well, now I have an interesting question. So we know he's clumsy and we know that he's slow, but he's a dreamer. Is there, and with, a Duergar society, you don't normally encounter Duergar with the name of like Timothy. So is that kind of like I don't know, is that like a pejorative or something like that put upon him by like the other Duergar where he's at? Where it's like, you're
Mhm.
such a Timothy, and he's like, he doesn't know any better, and so all the other Duergar, like, he has like a proper Duergar name, but they don't address him by it. They just call him Timothy because he's like, oh, you met this kind of a guy before. He's such a Timothy, sort of a thing.
Mhm. I actually had that kind of thought that it was just like I don't want to say a nickname maybe put oh, that's not nice of me. A nickname put on him by um like the other dwarves. Ooh, I wonder because there are books people read. Maybe Timothy knows how to read. Maybe Timothy was like reading a book somewhere and it was like I imagine him like huddled under like the covers as like a child and reading like a fairy tale or something very
Mm.
like flowery, something very nice. I wonder if he dreams of being like a prince or a knight or something. I bet.
Oh.
Ooh, could you imagine if he dreams of being a knight and then every time he has to like sharpen swords and things like that, he's like, I wish that I could be a knight.
Oh, and so he thinks if he does that enough times, eventually, like something magical will happen.
Maybe so like he calls himself. Oh, he'll be so
It's also
cute.
a
He
very
calls
teenager
himself.
thing of like, no, call me Timothy. And it's like,
Yeah.
blarg, dagabagaba. It's like, get back to work. And he's like, you will call me Timothy. And they just shake their heads and they're just like, get back to work,
Yeah.
kid.
I definitely imagine that like Timothy was this is horrible. This is like Voldemort level. That's horrible. This is like Voldemort level nickname giving because my favorite fact about Voldemort, the Dark Lord, is that he gave himself that nickname.
Right. Right. Because he was originally
So
Tom Riddle and then it was a whole,
yeah.
yeah.
And he sat in front of his whole name and arranged all the little letters around and was like, that one. I like that nickname. So I wonder if Timothy is maybe his like favorite like knight in shining armor from some
Mm,
book he read somewhere, and
yeah.
he just refuses to tell. Not in any like, no, I'm not going to tell you my real name. But he's like, I'm Timothy, and they're like, that is not your name, and he goes, I'm Timothy.
Mm, okay.
I want to be Timothy.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's very fun. And so certainly, dungeon masters out there, if you use fantasy name generator, or you have a good idea of what a Duergar name would be. That's really what Timothy name what his name really is. But he just refers to himself as Timothy, because he's with typical teenage arrogance, like he's insistent. Um, but not like an angsty teen. I like that, like he very much believes in like these fairy tales and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
like that's what he wants to pursue. But yet he's here being a whetstone cutter, like serving the Duergar army or whatever else that he's doing, forced to do, and I just want to go out there and sing, and I want to be like Sir Timothy, the grand gallant knight that I read about in this book that fell down here that some adventurer dropped and that I was
Oh my
lucky enough to pick
goodness.
up or whatever.
Yeah, I like that. I was just imagining to myself that he has like a little like the sidekick, Timothy, has like his own little sidekick. The only thing I know about myconids is from D&D, but I imagine he saw like a little myconid and he was like, this is what a flower must look like. So he's got this little baby myconid that he like he hangs out with. It's his best friends and he just calls him Flower.
Oh, I like that. That is cool. Okay. Could be very interesting implications, especially if little flower grows up to be like some kind of like mastermind myconid that then begins to release a bunch of pollen and like mind
Yeah.
control all the duergar to serve the fungus needs or whatever.
No, but like now, right now he's cute.
Right now he's cute.
Right now, Flower is cute. Oh my God, could you imagine the absolute horror and heartbreak that Timothy, this is horrible, that Timothy would experience when like, because again, I don't know anything truly about the real like lore of the Myconids, because I believe they're like hive-minded, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. They are.
But
If
can
you
you
want to know more
imagine?
about myconids, I might recommend my buddies over at the Dispel Magic podcast, where they did a whole dedicated episode on myconids. And I
I love
don't,
that.
and maybe Kill Every Monster. Kill Every Monster also has done an episode on myconids. Very, very spooky, very cool episode, because I believe they had a fungus expert on actually to talk about like
Really?
all sorts of different cool science facts about mushrooms and stuff like that. So I'm also happy to plug other shows on my
Yeah.
podcast as well for stuff that I consume and enjoy.
I was just about to say that one of my favorite things about this podcast so far is, as a green brand new DM who genuinely knows very very little of the great vast amount of information that is D&D, your podcast, I've been like, wow, there's been a lot of really really cool people on this podcast, because I remember I listened partially, unfortunately partially, to the episode where you had one of the like speakers, producers or something, but the Kill Every Monsters podcast I started to look into because of because of this podcast.
Oh, good. Yeah, Dylan will be happy to hear that. Yeah,
Yeah.
still waiting to get a Rom. I know Rom's very busy, but one day we'll have a Rom, and then we'll have Dylan and a Rom. It'll be great. So yeah, totally. Yeah, myconids. Okay, so we like that he's got this little myconid buddy named Flower. Yeah, I feel like this is just, you spoke it into being, so like that has to be like a true fact
I think
about
so. I
Timothy.
think so.
But also, if we like our NPCs on this podcast to have something cool on them. So if you want to figure out what's going to be a valuable item, piece of lore, secret, or ideal or concept that Timothy ascribes to, let's roll. This is where we do a combination. So you roll a d4 first for the category, and then a d6 for the particular thing.
Okay, so this one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a D4.
The
I
one that
know what
looks
I'm
like a
doing.
caltrop that would hurt very badly if you stepped on it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so our D4 is a 1.
Okay, so this is going to be an item. So now a d6,
Okay.
and let's figure out what special item that Timothy has on
Okay.
his person.
A 2.
A 2. Okay. Well, your answer was provided by previous guest Michael Horsley. A sled.
A what?
A sled.
A sled.
Yeah, so what's so special about this sled that Timothy has?
Can people sled in the Underdark? I don't think they do that.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they could. I mean, there's all sorts of like deep drops and stuff like that. There's probably like, big hills or mountains under mountains and stuff like that. I'm sure there's all sorts of opportunities for sledding, but of course, duergar are all about serious business. So why would they ever stop to
Yeah.
sled down a hill covered in fungus or mold or whatever?
Is it? There's lots of hills. There's no fun. There's no fun in the Underdark. Only darkness and terror. So I wonder. Oh my goodness, Kurt. So here's what I'm thinking. Sled. I think that Timothy maybe stumbled across it, right? I think maybe when he stumbled across it, he was very young and didn't really realize what was going on. But like, I imagine that there was a merchant or a traveler, because I know it's actually quite difficult to get into the Underdark. I've listened to like one Dungeon Cast episode about the Underdark, and that's all that I know. But I imagine maybe like someone went down there with his little sled and like was traveling, right, and then he died because it's the Underdark. But I imagine Timothy found the sled, and in the sled was like a bunch of clothes and, things that this traveler had brought with him. And there was that book. There was the book that yeah. So they found the book. So he found the book, read the book, maybe even like by the light of flowers, a little like luminescent mic in itself. That's so adorable. I love Flower almost more than I love Timothy. And Flower is going to become a villain one day, so that's horrible of me. But I imagine that that's where he found his little book. I imagine that maybe there's part of me that wants to say he keeps it like stashed away. Like it's covered in like a little tarp. It's like a mile away or so from the shop, just like hidden away.
Yeah.
And whenever he gets off work or whenever he gets into a fight with whoever it is that is around him about being a dreamer, he gets really upset and he wants to cry, but he doesn't. And he runs away to this little sled that he's kind of built into this little fort of his. And he just hides and he reads his little knight in shining armor book. And it makes him feel better.
Now, I had some interesting questions, because it's a sled and, you were saying, this, from what I know about the Underdark, it's hard to get to. I would say that's debatable depending on your approach. Like Matt Colville and MCDM, he's talked about in his world, he assumes that the Underdark is like a whole separate realm. Like it's literally like traveling to a different plane of existence, but you have to go down and then you cross a barrier and then, now I'm in the Underdark. Other people are just like, hey, you've got like, the surface, you've kind of got like cave systems going. If you just keep going down, then eventually you reach the Underdark. The deepest pits of like the mundane world. That's kind of like the camp I'm more in, but I kind of also like the idea occasionally of playing with like, it operates like its own different plane of existence. So yeah, there's a couple different theories and ideas that float around, but see, I heard sled and I started thinking of like cold Arctic tundra sorts of conditions. So I was wondering if like, maybe this explorer was somewhere far up in a place where there's, like cold weather conditions. So they needed a sled to get around. And then they went tumbling over a ravine and this thing just fell all the way down into the Underdark. It was like frozen in ice or something. And then that's how Timothy stumbled upon it. If it's that, or if it is like some sort of like, some sort of constructed sled that works in a more general sort of environment, but it depended on how you wanted the rails of the sled to be constructed. Is like, it works better on ice, or like, it's like a flat, like some sort of curved rail thing that works more generally across like dirt and grass and stuff like that.
I think I like the idea of it having been like its previous home having been in some sort of Arctic environment, because in the sled cart along with the book was the traveler's hat. It's a little Santa hat. And it's probably, I don't know how big duergar's heads are, but I imagine it's like a little too big for Timothy because he's so young. And everybody makes fun of him because I feel so bad. I just created like a whole victim. Everybody makes fun of Timothy because he's a dreamer and he wants to be a knight and he has this cute little raggedy Santa hat that he refuses to take off. It makes him feel like that. But he calls it like an explorer hat.
Okay. No, I love Timothy. Like, no, this is great. This is great. See, this is what the fun of being a dungeon master is all about, is like getting to make all these weird and interesting people that your players will get to run across. Okay. So we're imagining Arctic condition, this sled that fell down. It has the book of fairy tales in it. Maybe, if we're imagining, okay, like I know popular, actual play, actual show, Critical Role, animated cartoon out there. And, we know, if the story of Chetney is like the new character that Travis Willingham plays, but his origins were in a Critical Role Christmas themed one-shot adventure they did where they were all like Christmas elves. And so Chetney was the character that Travis played then. So they have sort of I played with the idea of like, there is some sort of like Santa-like figure that must exist in their world, possibly. So maybe are you playing with that idea? Like, this was like a Christmas gnome from the far north that was this explorer, was on this sled, and tragedy befell them. Because what I was getting to is like, oh, it's a book of fairy tales, but there were other Christmas presents or something like that. Some other kinds of presents or weird odds and ends. So it's possible that like Timothy's in possession of like weird magic items that he has no business possessing because they were abandoned on this sled or whatever.
Oh my goodness. Could you imagine like a tragic Santa story where like I know Santa doesn't like exist, but like Santa like falls into the Underdark.
Well, St. Nicholas existed, that's for sure.
Oh my goodness. That would be so funny. Just like a little, I mean, that's not funny. The guy fell into the Underdark and died, but like a little sled full, well, it's really like a sleigh, but a sled just like full of like little weird like baubles and odds and ends.
Yeah.
And Timothy's got like a little like alcove where he stashes his little sled and he's like kind of lined up all the interesting things that he's found.
Yeah.
And he's got his little, oh my goodness.
And so it's kind of like an Ariel sort of story, like for the Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Look at this thing. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you say my collection's complete? Yeah. So all that good stuff. What's a who's it? He like has like some sort of like weird arcane magic item, and he's like, yeah, the what's a bauble. Yeah.
Ooh, that's so cute.
And then he has his animal. Well, I mean his fungus, but like his animal companion, which is Flower. So
oh no, that's so precious.
Someday I'll be part of their world.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so sad. Because Flower's gonna like grow up a little bit and he's gonna be like eaten into the hive mind, and Timothy's gonna lose his best friend.
Well, Timothy will be exploring the world by then.
Maybe.
We'll see. Depends on how it goes. Okay, so we know he's got the sled. He's got all the old presents and the magic baubles and the what's-a-who's-its and stuff like that. Okay, I really dig. But now we come to the question of the side quest. So what is going to be a quest that Timothy would be willing to recruit or hire player characters to go and do? So if you're inspired, you can think of that now based on what we've learned, or if you want to randomize the last one or, roll and use it as a springboard, the last dice to roll is a D12.
D12. I know I have one of those too. It's got a 12 on it.
Yep. And it looks like a soccer ball.
Okay. I got an 8.
8. Ooh, okay. Well, this answer was suggested by our, at the time, Patreon supporter, Nicholas Cardarelli of the Raised on D&D podcast. Thank you, Nick. A stray dog is wearing an ornate, jewel-encrusted collar with a note wedged between the collar and its neck. The note is a plea for help with a hurriedly drawn map. Is this something plausible that Timothy would be willing to offer as a side quest, or do you think we have to re-roll? I mean, that's pretty good, but...
No, I love that.
Okay.
I want Timothy to go on this journey, but I am imagining, oh no.
So how is it going to work with Timothy? Because Timothy's the one offering the side quest. Did Timothy find the dog? Is that what it is?
NPCs can accompany characters on.
Oh, sure.
Quests.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So maybe oh my goodness, this little puppy comes up to Tim, and he's so interested because it's a cute dog. I'm convinced it's a cute dog, and his collar, it's so interesting. It's jeweled, it's shiny, it's beautiful, and Timothy wants to be the good in the world, right? So he finds the note. Oh man, I just made it really mean. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so it's a plea for help, and there's a little map, and I imagine maybe the map is to a nearby abandoned guard tower, right? But oh my goodness, I just wrote I don't even know how it would work as a quest, but I was thinking to myself that it was almost like a prank on Tim. In the end, the quest ends up being a prank. That's so horrible.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we've already discovered, or we've talked about in our discussion of all the items that we have, or the things we found out about Timothy. He has this sled. There is some sort of connection to an Arctic environment above. Maybe this area is riddled with deep ravines and caverns that just plummet into the Underdark. Is it possible that some sort of rich guy or explorer that has a dog with an ornate jewel encrusted collar it like just fell. Like, oh, I broke my leg. I didn't bring the cleric this time, so like I'm stuck. And or a cartographer was exploring
Yeah.
the wilderness, and then is like, my leg is broke. I found this abandoned guard tower. Okay, let me like based on where I was, like here's the map that I've drawn, and like okay, boy, puppy, dog, you're my only hope. Go and find help. And then because they're in the Underdark, like this is the nearest settlement that they've come to, whether it's a duergar settlement. Because we didn't even figure that out. Like, is Timothy just part of a duergar civilization? Is it like some sort of like mishmash Underdark society that Timothy's found himself in, or what are you
Mhm.
thinking?
I kind of imagined him living in a, I guess, normal for the duergar, like a normal duergar society. You have your normal sort of structure, and then the stoneworkers and the whetstone workers and the masons, and that's a stoneworker. The masons, just kind of doing their thing to build their little society, to further their army, and all that kind of stuff. And I guess for all intents and purposes, Timothy lives a fairly normal life for a duergar. I mean, it's not a great life because
Mhm.
it's terrifying down there,
Sure.
but nothing super, super crazy, which is why I think he dreams a little bit of more. So I like this idea where there's like a traveler that gets hurt or like is somewhere and sends the dog to deliver this little message, and it's like tied to his little collar and it's so adorable.
Mhm.
And Timothy finds the note and finds the little map, and it's literally just like send help or something like that.
Mhm.
And I imagine that Timothy is like, if I go and save this person, like help this person, they will take me back to wherever they came from.
Mm. Okay.
Oh my goodness, because anywhere would be better than the Underdark when you want to be a knight.
Yeah, of course, certainly. And so then how do the player characters kind of enter the picture? Because so we've established that Timothy lives in a typical or a normal sort of Duergar civilization. So I don't know. Well, depending on how you play Duergar in your world, they could be openly hostile, or maybe they're just very self-centered, very self-interested sort of dwarves that don't really like having outsiders come and visit them. But what's
Yeah.
going to be sort of the circumstances that they're going to come across Timothy? Or are we imagining, because we've established that Timothy has his little hidey hole, hideaway, where he has like his stuff? Are the player characters going to just randomly encounter him like he's on his way to his secret hidey hole of all his cool stuff he's found, and he's like, oh my gosh, like you actually look like you all are capable of adventuring and doing all this stuff, you should come help me, because if you help me then I can go become a knight. If they don't react like, Dorgar, evil, we must attack you immediately,
Mhm.
kind of a thing.
I kind of imagined that Timothy had found the dog and found the note and was like really, just like really enthusiastic, really excited, really hopeful. So he packs up his little rucksack and he just goes,
Mhm.
right? And this requires a little bit of like collaboration
Sure.
and like maybe like a lack of just murder hobos, but like the I imagine the party would just kind of like find him. Maybe he's in trouble, maybe he's like stuck in like some like vines or like a cave somewhere
Yeah.
and like needs help, and
Sure.
he can ask the players for help, and hopefully the players don't ignore him and or murder hobo him, because
Mhm.
that would be so so sad. But I can imagine he goes and like scoops up Flower and he's like, we're going on an adventure, and he goes on this little adventure for Flower, and it probably goes terribly awry because remember he's green, he doesn't know anything
Mhm.
about like the world outside, not really. And he is kind of clumsy, and that's why I imagine he maybe picks up like an old axe that was just kind of like discarded or something like that, and like
Yeah.
a sword that's a little too big for his body, and he's like, I know I can do this, and he's so full of hope. Oh my goodness. So he just goes and he gets himself stuck, and the
Yeah.
players just kind of like find him. He's like, please, will you help me? Like I can't, not like I can't do this, but like I'm on an adventure. Please, will you like come with me and help me? Like you guys look really capable. And I don't know, because we don't know what this party particularly looks like, but I imagine
Right.
that he's just so excited to see like people
Right.
that or creatures or things that don't look like duergar and don't look like drow and don't look like all the things that he's seen. So he says, you like must be good, I guess,
Mhm.
like I'm just gonna hope that
Yeah.
like you're not gonna
Right.
that like this is gonna go well, but you guys look interesting, and so surely you must be adventurers.
Yeah. I love that he picks up like the rusty pickaxe, like maybe all the discarded armor and
Mhm.
weapons that aren't good enough for the army. He rifles through them. So he looks like what he thinks a version of a knight should be from what he's got laying around. And so when they stumble across him, he's like clanking and making a bunch of noise, probably like the paladin or something like that in the adventuring party, I'm guessing. And then they're
Zero
just like,
chance.
what is this? He's got like a fungus on his shoulder and he has like whatever well, I mean, for some reason I got the idea that like it was a pug, that's something that found him, like some sort of ridiculous dog that you would have no
Yeah.
business being in the Underdark, but maybe it's like a mastiff or a Saint Bernard or something like that.
What are those dogs? They're hairless. Like the dog from Coco. That's horrible to say. I know what the dog is.
Oh, like a Mexican hairless?
Yeah, like the little, like they're kind of lanky, they're kind of dorky looking, but they're so like, yeah, they're so like lanky and beautiful, but not like a pretty like tough dog. I think that he was just like the adventuring buddy of the guy that fell down there.
Okay.
He'll be so cute. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I think that I like that.
Okay. So we're imagining that the party is going to stumble across Timothy randomly in their exploration of the Underdark. We're assuming that this is near some sort of like above in the mundane world on the surface. We're in like some sort of Arctic or snowy sort of condition. So definitely something you could probably drop in your Rime of the Frost Maiden campaigns or in the Out of the Abyss, but you center it more in like an Arctic sort of condition if you want your party to be able to escape that whole plot of Out of the Abyss. Or, we're just homebrewing. We're just like, hey, this is like the North Pole, Greenland, Canada sort of part of the world. And all the crevices and cracks of the earth lead down to the Underdark here. And then this is where we're going to find Timothy. Okay, so the party comes across Timothy, Flower, the Myconid, and this dog, which it might be kind of cool or funny if there's like a particular steed that this Sir Timothy from the story had, and so that's what he refers to the dog. But maybe there's like a clear name tag on the dog that says something else. But he's like, ah, yes, my faithful companion Winstead. And then like the collar says like Bubbles or something like that, something like dorky and adorable. It's like,
I love
yes,
that.
we're here on this adventure. We have to go. And look, this person is trapped on this map, and this is where they're located. So the party gets invited onto the quest. So what's going to be the reward for the party when they successfully reunite the dog with its master and providing aid or whatnot to the person who's trapped?
Ooh. Oh no. Okay, so maybe there's gold,
Sure.
maybe there's something. Uh I imagine maybe somebody from the party tries to steal the like beautiful bejeweled dog collar, right? But like I imagine there's gold. I imagine there's gold from the traveler that's like stuck. They're like, here's some of my wares. Here you've helped me, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe like further down the line in a campaign, there's a forever discount. I don't know. But I could you imagine if the little like the big the two big like rusty sword, and I imagine Timothy has named the sword maybe, and he loves it because it's his, and he's gonna take it on an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
At the very end of the quest line, he like gives the sword to the party.
Oh.
And it's really not super valuable, but it's valuable to him.
Well, here's something interesting. Now I know in fifth edition, with paladins, like personally for my homebrew taste, I like that paladins are tied to a god. Like that feels right of like you have to make an oath or a pledge to a deity or some sort of higher power in order to get your paladin powers. However, as we've seen with Calamity, EXU Calamity, and some other, or even atheistic paladins, if you will, that they swear their oath or whatever, and then that's what gives them their power. Do you like the idea of, because he is this teenager, he's earnest, he believes this in his soul, that like this is his great weapon, and because he's
Yeah.
sworn his oath to like, I'm going to become a knight and I'm going to do this great thing, it somehow has imbued this rusty old cruddy looking duergar blade, and it actually is a magic item now.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I wonder what would the magic item like do? Like if somebody else were to pick up the magic item, what kind of like magic would it hold?
Yeah.
You know how funny if it would just like is there like a luck
Yeah, there is
mechanic
a luck
and
mechanic where it like, so anyone who like holds the blade has the lucky feat, which would then allow them to be able to so many times a day be able to roll a D20 with advantage to be able to like try and succeed on like a saving throw or an ability check or something like that. That's
I
possible.
like that.
Okay,
I
so
like the idea that he doesn't know because like we said, like he's clumsy, he's a little green, but like somehow he just kind of does it, you know,
yeah,
he
he
just kind of
pulls his way
gets
forward. He has plot
yeah, I
armor.
like that.
He has plot armor to
Yes.
save him.
I like that.
Okay. So in getting this blade, it makes you lucky. Probably has like some sort of basic magic traits, whether you want it to be like probably a +1 sounds fair, of like, yeah, it's a +1 blade. So it does like +1 to attacks and damage. It's got the lucky trait. And then I don't know, maybe it does like some other cool thing. Maybe it's I don't know. I was trying to think back to like the story that he read, like if there's like some sort of spell that it lets you do once a day, or if it's just, you know, because it's like, oh, because it's like Sir Timothy in the story, and Sir Timothy was able to like, you know, slay a dragon, and so it like has like a dragon slaying feat where it does like, it's a +1 magic blade normally, but like to like if you're fighting like dragonborn or dragons or half dragons or anything dragon adjacent, it does like +3 or something like that against them. If that inspires you.
Ooh, I like that. I like that idea that it just like does for some whatever reason like extra damage to
Like a specific kind of foe that like Sir Timothy was
yeah.
against.
I like the idea. There are dragons in the Underdark. There are dragons
Oh
in the
yeah,
Underdark.
there's dragons everywhere in Dungeons and
Yeah,
Dragons.
I like that idea. I guess I think dragons is probably a fair and useful to the party um, kind of feat to have. One of my friends was telling me about, I think one of the quest lines in, I think he was talking about a previous Baldur's Gate game
Hmm.
where you have to go into the Underdark and there's like a dragon that you can get to help you stop some sort of ritual involving drow and like the dragon eggs.
Hmm.
I don't know why I asked you that, but so I like the idea of dragons. I think that that's so precious.
Okay.
That
So
you can slay
we
dragons.
like that he's, you know, he's serious, he believes this oath, he's sworn it,
Mhm.
and so because of the merit of that alone, it's enchanted this particular sword, and he's willing to part with it for successfully reuniting the dog with its owner. Maybe the, you know, the owner can give some sort of separate reward for the party for the rescue as well as to Timothy,
Yeah,
and then Timothy, being such a humble and brave knight, gives them the sword, and then the party finds out like, oh, actually, this
magic.
rusted looking thing is magical now, and so it makes you lucky. It's a generic
Mhm.
+1 weapon, but against dragons and dragon types, it's an extra. It's instead treated as a +3 weapon.
Yeah. I imagine that he gives them the sword because he like really believes that he's gonna go out into like the what do they call them, like the overworld. He's gonna leave. I imagine he wants to leave the Underdark, and that's why
Mhm.
he wants to help this person. So he's like, I now can like go on to realize like my dream
Mhm.
of becoming like a knight or whatever. And he really hopes that like the party will. He gives the party the sword because like they, you know, the real journey was the friends you made along the way kind
Mhm.
of thing. I wonder if there would be like a morality aspect to that. If like the party could only get the sword if like all of the party was like not horrible people. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah,
Because I
I mean
imagine
that's a
Timothy is like
condition. So certainly he's willing to offer the sword. Like I go back to
a slave.
like the Fallout games, like Fallout 3 and New Vegas had like the child at heart perk. So you
Mm-hmm.
had special dialogue options with the children characters. So like that's how you could acquire Wazo Rifle in Fallout 3, which was like a
Mm-hmm.
unique laser rifle item, or uh, in Freeside in New Vegas, that's how you got the giant space laser gun. Like the kids are playing with it, they don't know what it really is, but
Yeah.
if you fix up the power plant, then you can get a death laser from space. If you just
Mhm.
talk to the kid nicely and you get it. So okay, so that's a possible win for the party. Is they get this on the surface looking crappy, rusted sort of thing, but it's actually magical. So it's deceiving in that way. They can use it as a deception against their enemies. And then in actuality, you're like, oh, this thing is powerful. But then otherwise, is there an ability maybe or a possibility, because he believes himself to be this knight or this very young paladin in training, where he could maybe tag along as like a retainer or a squire, especially if there is some sort of knight character already in the party, like
Mhm.
another paladin maybe decides to take little Timothy as a squire
Oh
or
my
a little
God.
hireling, a follower, retainer character for your group.
I love that idea that he could just live in your camp or like tag along with you for certain things and continue to realize his his true calling of being a knight. Oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. And then maybe if not, there's like a chance to like run into him later and he's just been living his could you imagine have you watched Loki,
Yes.
that show? I imagine like maybe it's like because I want Timothy to be successful, but so far Timothy has been a relatively comedic kind of character.
Mhm.
And imagine if he's like Sylvie, where he's like, I'm living my best life, and he's really not doing all that much, but everything is exciting to him still, and everything is like a grand journey. And
Mhm.
he's just running around whatever city or whatever place he's in, just the happiest to be there, running mundane errands.
Okay.
Aw,
Very
that's so
cool.
precious.
And then, of course, we have to consider the opposite. What's going to be the consequence of failure or refusing the call to the adventure? I know we talked about like, oh, the party encounters him, they think he's an enemy, they attack him
Mhm.
outright, and only to
Yeah.
discover like, oh, the dog had this map on its collar. Is there anything more that could be a consequence of failure or refusing to help Timothy in his quest?
I imagine I don't know. You know, there could be like this whole like dragon. I would love for this little journey to mirror whatever journey Timothy read about in his book.
Hmm.
I imagine that maybe there's like a dragon somewhere along the way, something that you find, something that's part of another quest, or something that's like guarding the guy that is
Mm.
stuck. And Timothy's little blade with his +3 dragon slaying ability would have really come in handy, but you can't get the sword because it's just like a like whatever perception that you would roll, whatever observations that you would make if you refuse to help Timothy, is like it's a rusty old sword and you don't pick it up, for the most part. So you don't get that like extra help in that like journey further down the line, and
Okay.
then you don't get the sword.
Yeah. And then you miss out on the sword. Okay. All right, so you feel like we're good with getting all the success and the failures figured out for the quest.
I think so.
Okay.
I really like this.
And you feel like Timothy is a very good character, realize there's no other optional questions you wish to explore for the character.
I don't really think so. I think he's a very just like simple, straightforward kind of person.
Okay.
He we know what he wants. He knows what he wants. Everything that he does is in with that goal in mind of becoming a knight, and he finally gets to realize it. And this is his go at it.
Perfect. Well, now that we've got little Timothy created, I think it's time we throw him into a random encounter. This random encounter is brought to you by my sponsor, Zencastr. Zencastr came into my life when I didn't think I would need it, but now I definitely need it with trying to raise a family and keep the podcast episodes flowing and all that stuff, and not trying to keep myself awake for all hours of the night trying to get these episodes edited. Thanks to Dane and Benjamin over at Dispel Magic showing me this service, I was hooked, and I decided to become a paying member so I could get access to all these awesome tools with editing and getting these great episodes to you. So it is so easy and super easy now to record a podcast with Zencastr. You log into your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. You could record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen, knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. A hard sell. On that point alone, I've been podcasting for a couple of years now. That is amazing. So that is a great selling point of this service. You can sound your best. Have you ever worried what you might sound like on a podcast? With Zencastr's post-production process, it makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes the ums and ahs as you click on that feature in the post-production settings, and in your recordings, it's going to remove those awkward pauses and conversations too with the click of a button. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. It really is that easy. It's all in one. If you have thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are done. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and all other major podcast destinations. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SIDEKQPodcast, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Again, the website, zencastr.com/pricing. Use the code SIDEKQPodcast and get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. Thank you so much to the sponsor, and back to the podcast. All right, so we are here in the part now where we get to do a random encounter, a bit of a role play, a vignette, a scene with the character that we've made today. So now I think you'll do a great job in presenting Timothy as a character, but the question becomes, who should I be in the scene? Am I going to be one of my adventuring characters that stumbles across Timothy? Is this going to be Timothy in the whetstone cutting place and, oh, kid, your head is not in the game. You need to focus on your work and stop daydreaming. Is it going to be a flashback to Timothy discovering the sled, or I don't know what kind of, or finding flower? Or I don't know what kind of scene are you interested in presenting Timothy in today?
Oh, I don't know. What kind of, because I know in a previous episode you had listed your characters.
Yeah.
Could you do that for me?
Yeah,
'Cause
sure.
I found it a little interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got a whole cast of characters to choose from if they want to stumble and meet. So we've got Duncan, who's the recklessly brave adventurer for hire, happy-go-lucky, no task too small, no feat too daring kind of a guy. We've got Sonia, who's the warrior woman who started off as a barbarian and multi-classed into a paladin, who serves a god who wishes to redeem the undead. We have Korak, who is the lawful evil arcane trickster roguish dwarf, like an actual proper dwarf. We've got Chrisley, who's the herbalist, botanist, wood elf druid, who then multi-classed into a cleric who serves living memory. We've got Orion, who is the astral elf illusionist wizard, kind of like a Spock sort of a dude. We've got Agape, who is the lilac-colored tiefling Sorlock, started off as a wild magic sorcerer from the Feywild influence, and then made a Archfey Warlock pact with Prosperina, one of our other characters made on this show. And then the newest one that we've added is Lifespell the Necromancer, who is a little forest gnome old man necromancer who has his Octavius the Skeleton Manservant in tow as well. So those are the characters we have made so far on the podcast. And if none of them sound good, we're certainly happy to roll up a new one randomly to be added.
Oh, because I think a lot of his little thing is like alone. So we could drop him in like a, okay, let's not roll. Let me not get ahead of myself. Let, let me think. I think it would be interesting to see Timothy start his little journey.
Mm-hmm.
But that's difficult because in the beginning he's alone. You know what I mean?
Right. Do you
So
want him to come across one of these more seasoned sort of adventurers, or do you think his journey should parallel someone else who's like starting off on their adventuring life too?
I think it would be funny to see if he like came across someone who's like like a little bit more well seasoned, who knows what he's doing, because I think that it would be interesting to play with that. Like, I don't know anything, but I'm just fueled by optimism.
Okay. So I don't know. Is there a particular character that I read out that stands out to you as wanting that you would want to meet Timothy? I mean, for sure, I thought maybe
Yeah.
Korak would be interesting because they would play against each other because Korak is very much lawful evil, but he's a dwarf. And he's more of a
Yeah.
surface dwarf than he is an actual like duergar
Mhm.
underdark dwarf.
Yeah, that one kind of stood out to me. The dwarf, because I think that'd be really interesting. It's like, you're a bad dwarf.
Hmm.
Like, you don't know how to dwarf. All you want to do is be a prince. Um, Someone that also kind of stood out to me was the no task too small, the like kind of sword for hire
Duncan.
Duncan. But I think that if we took Duncan, I think it would be chaos. In my head, they play off each other and they get into more trouble.
He does have chaos that seems to follow him, but also
Yeah.
likewise protected by plot armor. So, you know.
that would be that would be an amazingly chaotic story, but it would just be, I think it would be full of just Deus Ex Machina. We just kind of managed to get through somehow.
Right.
So I am interested in this, the dwarf
Okay, you want to meet Korak.
character, Korak.
So where we last left our hero, Korak, he had found himself in the Astral Sea, where he was at Druthers and Druthers Brothers offices, where he was getting a pair of paralegals advice on how to get out of some of his troubles in the Feywild, due to his involvement, allegedly, with some sort of thieving of goods and art and other valuable items, while an archphase war was waging. And so, after retrieving the 3 buckets of greeble oil, which was blood of some type of rare and valuable creature only found in the Astral Sea, Korak was able to set the Druthers brothers for life on greeble oil, and they agreed to help him out and get him back to the mundane world. But maybe perhaps the portal wasn't quite calibrated as correctly as they hoped. And so when Korak steps through the portal, he finds himself suddenly in the Underdark, and he begins to swear in Dwarvish because he's like, man, I did everything to get like away from the mountains and the Underdark and all this stuff, and now here I am back at it. And he's not going to be able to get too very far when suddenly he like senses something and he like hushes up and he like goes to like hide behind, press himself up against a wall as he's beginning to hear some sort of like clanking and some like torchlight, kind of like, well, maybe not torchlight because Duergar have superior dark vision. So he hears some clanking coming up the hallway. And so what's he going to see with his dark vision coming up the hallway of this passageway of in the Underdark?
Oh, I imagine he sees, that would be very cute. I imagine he sees Timothy, and I imagine he is doing a little bit of exploring, a little bit of pretending, being inspired by his story of Timothy the Knight. And he's almost playing knight, right? So Korak hears him, that's what he hears. He hears him coming up this little dark kind of tunnel, with probably with flour.
Okay.
Yeah. So, ooh, I imagine Timothy kind of, he's up against a wall. I imagine he kind of like walks almost past him,
Mm. Yeah,
right? And
Korak
almost
did
kind
roll
of
a
doesn't
stealth check.
see.
He rolled pretty high. I mean, he is a rogue, so like, yeah, he's like
Yeah,
pressed up against the wall and he's like holding his breath and not moving. And
yeah.
teenage Timothy doesn't notice.
No, I imagine not. I imagine he's a little distracted by his imaginary quest. And so he's just kind of like walking down this little tunnel, talking to himself, like proclaiming himself a knight. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Oh, that's so cute.
Does he have his sled in tow?
I don't think he has his sled in tow. I think he's probably come from the sled and has like gone to the sled, picked up all his little things, um, and just kind of like nearby is just having the time of his life.
Okay. And is the dog with him at this point or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think this probably is going to serve as like a like backstory for him.
Okay.
You know what I
Or
mean?
or something
Or
or something
or
interesting could happen. So 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 he lets Timothy get past him and he's very puzzled. He has a very puzzled look on his face hearing what Timothy is saying. I'll allow it that Korak knows Underdark or Undercommon rather. He hasn't had to use it in a long while, so it takes him a second. He's like, "Did I hear him right? He's talking about being a knight, and like, what is that all about?" And so, I don't know, he has a moment of hesitation because normally he would just like cold clock him in the back of the head, take whatever he has, and like run off. But like, there's just something about the optimism, the cheerfulness, the sincerity of this that like actually cuts to the lawful evil heart within Korak. Um, and so maybe he's gonna, maybe he sees that he's young and he's like, I probably shouldn't be killing young people. Old people
Mhm.
or older people, I have no problem with, but younger people, So he's just gonna use the opportunity to kind of like whirl on him and be like, in Dwarvish is just gonna be like, if you were any louder, I would have already gutted you, boy. What are you doing making so much
Mhm.
noise?
Oh, and I imagine Timothy gets flustered because I think he thinks that he's by himself. Oh, that's really sad. He's by himself, and I think he gets like not afraid. I think he gets a little afraid. You know what I mean? He's
Mhm.
just suddenly like accosted by this other elf. So I think I think he almost starts to like, I don't want to say apologize, but I think he freaks out a little bit, and
Mhm.
it's just like, I'm sorry, who are you? What is happening?
Mhm.
And I almost imagine they would struggle. Like he would just kind of, you said he grabbed him or he was just kind of like,
I
or
think
did
he
he just
like
talk to them?
I think he just kinda like popped out and held a knife. Not
Uh,
up to him, but I think he just kinda like pops out
oh,
suddenly. He's holding out his knives because like that's his typical
yeah.
trademark move. But
Hmm.
he's basically rolling an intimidation check and it sounds like he
Okay.
did pretty well on his intimidation.
Thank you,
So
good.
he's just kind of like, if you
Sorry.
breathed any louder, if you made any more noise or ruckus, you would already be dead. What are you doing down here? Kind of a thing. Where am I? What am I doing here? Kind of a
Mm.
thing.
So I think,
He's just as confused as this kid.
right. So I think Timothy probably he whips around and he sees him
Hmm.
and has this he goes pale, you know what I mean? He's afraid he's been caught in his little charade, I suppose. um, but they don't recognize each other because they don't know each other. They don't recognize each other. So he kind of like squares his shoulders and he introduces himself and he's like, I am the great knight Timothy. And he's like pretending to be, he's rolling like, he's trying to like not intimidate,
Hmm.
but to bolster himself. And he's like, I am Timothy the knight, and who are you? You have wandered like my my realm. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
He's trying to uh call upon the bravery
Hmm.
of Timothy the knight because he's terrified.
Hmm.
Poor Timothy is actually terrified.
I think seeing that he's a duergar, definitely throws him off because he thought like, oh, this is just going to be like, because the armor was covering him up, so he couldn't, and he didn't see a beard, so he didn't like quite. He was like probably some kind of dwarf kin, but he didn't know what kind. So he sees that he's a duergar. He sees that he's a teen, and that he believes himself to be this kind of character, so it actually kind of like catches Korak off guard. Maybe for a moment he has like a Ratatouille moment where he like zooms back into his past as a kid, and he remembers himself being like some sort of like, oh, look at me, I'm doing adventures and stuff like that, before he had his whatever bad thing happened in his life that turned him lawful evil and wanting to be a murder arcane trickster guy. So he actually pauses a little bit, hesitates, and then like actually softens and is like, well, I was with some GIF in the astral sea, and they helped me work to find some legal representation. Still waiting on that call, but they said they'd send me home. But it sounds like they were wrong in their calculations. So, am I in the Underdark?
And I imagine Timothy doesn't understand half of what Korak just said. All he knows is that Korak is in need of rescuing. So he kind of continues this sort of puffed out demeanor, and he's like, why, yes, you are in the great Underdark. And then I think because he's not super smart, I imagine he looks at him and he asks him, are you in need of rescuing?
Korak looks very taken aback and like, are you kidding me right now? And he's just like, he seeing that he's a Duergar and probably understands Undercommon a little bit better than Dwarvish, for his sake, is just kind of like an Undercommon, like, kid, I don't need rescuing. I just need to get pointed to the door so I can get out of here. Like, this is not where I want to be. Some guys, from the Astral Sea sent me here by mistake. Some pair of paralegals they are, but he's just looking for a way. He's looking for a way out. He's like, unless, well, I could kill you now, but I don't know. You got anything shiny on you? Anything to make this worth my while?
Ooh. I imagine, oh, this would be so cute. Yeah, I imagine that this is Timothy's first chance, right? Of he would see this as his first chance of leaving the Underdark. I do imagine that he fails. I don't imagine that Korak would take him with him. But I imagine he looks at Korak and tells him that he does indeed know, where civilization is, where he could get help. But he tries to bargain, I guess bargain a little bit. And his payment is like, I will squire you. I will be your loyal companion, and kind of tries to, like, not in like a horribly rude way, but like kind of tie himself a little bit to Korak. He wants Korak to take him with him. So he stands there and he's like, I do indeed, like, I do know where you can get help. I will accompany you and help you. Even, and I think he probably goes like even beyond the Underdark. Do you know what I mean? To try to almost convince Korak that he would be useful, that he would be like useful enough to take with him. Not quite as payment, but he doesn't have anything.
Right. Yeah, and so I think I'm the image I'm getting in my mind is from the very beginning of the last Crusade, where we have the flashback of Indiana Jones, and he's like on the Boy Scout trip, and he steals the Coronado Cross, and like the guy with the with original hat is chasing after him, and at the very end of that whole chase sequence, he's like, you got heart, kid, but like, this isn't the life for you, kind of a thing, and he gives him the hat, puts it down, and then it cross cuts to him later. So in Korak's mind, he's taking that similar sort of approach. Like, he sees that this Duergar is like, well, one is not acting evil like him. He doesn't think that this kid has an evil bone in his body. He truly believes he's like this some sort of like fairy tale knight that like he doesn't
Mhm.
understand, and he doesn't have time to really waste with this. And this, this kid is just this teen is this this nose wiper is like too busy
Mhm.
trying to like get himself out of here. And he's like, there's, this is a sinking ship. It's every man for himself. I'm not wasting my time helping you, kind of attitude of this guy. So he's just kind of like an undercommon kid. You got heart. You're playing fairy tale, you're playing pretend, and that's cute and all. But I've got business. I've killed men twice your size. I've, killed men half your size. I've killed a lot of people. Trust me. You don't want to be hanging out with me. It's bad for business. And so literally he's just going to be like, I need you to point a direction, and then I'm going to go that way. You're going to stay here, or you're going to go the opposite way. You're not following me. And if you do follow me, well, and he pulls out his knives and he starts doing a series of like knife like maneuvers and moves and stuff like that to like show that he means business. Maybe even
Mhm.
he has like a piece of his armor or something like that. He's an arcane trickster, so why not? He has like some sort of like blood pack hidden, or maybe it's some sort of prestidigitation effect, but he stabs himself in a place in his armor that he knows he can make like a fake blood effect happen. It's just an arcane trick,
Mhm.
but he makes it look like he stabs himself and he steals his gaze and he pulls the knife out and makes it seem like, oh, I just stabbed myself and like it doesn't even phase me. So like, again, kind of like another intimidation check or a bluff to basically be like, I mean business, don't follow me. You don't want to be hanging out with me, kind of a thing.
Oh, I almost imagine Timothy doesn't. You know what I mean? Because like Timothy is actually quite terrified,
Mhm.
and Timothy is drawing upon that like knightly courage that he wants to have. He wants to be like that. So I imagine that was a fairly successful
Okay.
intimidation check for Timothy. But I also imagine that like as they part ways, he just kind of sits there and he's like, that was so cool. That was so cool. And because he doesn't really know all that much about Korak, he kind of just like he holds on to that memory and he's like, that's so cool. I want to be like that cool. Oh my gosh, that's so adorable.
Mm. And I think the way that the scene closes out, so Korak does get pointed in the right direction, and Korak is going to have to do
Mhm.
his own adventure to figure out how to get himself out of Underdark and where he wants to go to continue on with his various many side quest adventures that he will encounter the course of this podcast in its entirety. But what I think happens is from like a different side tunnel. There's a rustling. It sounds like pebbles, like a cascade of pebbles. And then all of a sudden, this mastiff, this pug, some kind of dog with an ornate jeweled collar just kind of spills into the middle of the path right where Timothy is. And
Mhm.
you see that there's a little piece of parchment sticking out of the collar, but the dog doesn't know any better and just looks up at Timothy and just starts
Mhm.
panning like, "Hey, I just found a new best friend."
Mhm. Oh, that's adorable.
And scene. So there we go. We made it through the random encounter section of the show. So what did you think it was like getting to be Timothy?
That was so much fun. That was so much fun. I think as I had kind of mentioned that like this is all so brand new to me and it felt almost like liberating in a way, very very fun and liberating to just kind of go with whatever I was feeling.
Yeah.
Um I think at the end of the day this has really helped like my confidence as a potential DM because like I only played a little bit. Now I have to be responsible for so many different random characters that my table would want to meet.
Hmm.
This has really been like very very helpful and very very like fun to kind of test myself a little bit. I don't know if I succeeded or not,
I
but I
think you
had
did
fun.
great. Yeah, no, I love Timothy. I'm ready to stick Timothy in my next game. Like if anyone's running around in the Underdark, it's like, yeah, they're gonna meet Timothy. I mean, maybe by that point Timothy will have found the dog. He's carrying the sled. He just looks very out of
Mhm,
place. But yet he's just
mhm.
like this. He is this earnest teen who is determined to become a knight and be like Shrek, looks like, like when Shrek in the first movie was wearing the burnt out armor and is like, yeah,
Mhm.
I don't look like your typical knights. I don't think you want me. But in this case, it's like Timothy being like, I'm going to be Sir Timothy and I'm going to go on grand adventures. And, so he's got his little armor. He's got his Santa hat. He's got, he's got Flower, the little mic in it. And, he's just
Mhm.
ready to go out there. Like, I feel like there's a web comic about this kid. Or there's
Aw.
an actual, just like a series of missives or adventures that we're following along Timothy and figuring out what kind of trouble he's getting into. And certainly any number of Underdark related NPCs that have been made on this podcast as well that you could definitely pair up with Timothy and feel right at home. Certainly.
Mhm. Ah, I love him too. I was really excited about him. I had a completely different idea of who Timothy was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then just that endless optimism just kind of ate him up and turned him into to what we got.
Yeah. Yeah, so now this is the final thoughts section of the show. So this is where I always like to give the guests a chance to give me any feedback or notes or critiques and all that good stuff. And then certainly I want to leave the microphone, the stage, the soapbox, the platform to you. So if there's projects you're working on, if there's, if you want to be found on social media and any other passions or causes that we need to be made aware of, let us know.
Ooh, let me think. So, what am I working on right now? I'm not working on anything. I am hoping to move my tarot reading online to kind of bring in effectively clients, sort of start a business, but it doesn't exist yet. So,
Mm.
no, like I'm just kind of floating around doing my own thing, being uh, completely immaterial to everybody around me. But other than that, like there's no critique. Is there any advice that you would give me as a beginner DM?
Oh, ooh, interesting to turn it around to me here at the end. Any advice? Well, I mean, I think a lot of other people online, whether it be like Ginny D or Matt Colville or Super Geek Mike or Legal Kimchi, any of these other great creators out there on YouTube and in the community, I think, probably would say, for a new DM, have fun, you know, it's okay to not have everything nailed down. Be open to yes, but and yes, and, um, you know, uh, don't sweat it. Like as long as you're having fun, then your players will have fun. The collaboration, does wonders sometimes, like you did with me, just turning something around on me and then maybe making like inviting your players to be more creative in the world. So if you're like, I have no idea who the god of mischief is, just be like, yeah, so your character knows something about the god of mischief. What is it that they know? And then that could be really interesting ways to prompt
Mhm.
questions or thoughts on different aspects of your world, just having those earnest conversations, or just asking questions, getting feedback from your players. And certainly communication is going to be key, with like figuring out what kinds of stories and adventures they want to go on, what are the goals of their characters, and then what are the things that interest you, whatever things are fun, that you like in pop culture and stuff, rip them off and put them in your game. Maybe you have to tweak the names a little bit, and maybe your players know what they are, but if they're fans of it, then they'll love it even more because they're like, oh my gosh, this is like that thing from that episode of Star Trek that we all love. Like, yeah, that's awesome. Or like, oh, Baldur's Gate 3, this is like that one NPC companion character from Baldur's Gate 3 that now is just like this shopkeeper we get to come across, a sassy half vampire. Cool, we love this guy. We're gonna come to his shop all the time. It's stuff like that. So
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what I would say is just like have fun. Try and do like some, I would say like loose prepping with your notes. Like,
Mhm.
you could spend a lot of time getting detailed in the homebrew lore and like, oh, this is going to lead to this to cause to this. But I found that players will quickly take a left turn when you plan for them to take a right turn. So just be ready to drop all your plans at a moment's notice to just go off on the adventure with where your players want to go. Have some loosey goosey fun with it. Just have
Mhm.
fun because you're all telling a story together. And the end of the day, the goal is to have fun.
Yeah.
Well, certainly thank you, Jade, for taking a chance for being a guest on the podcast. I can't wait to have you back on, making even more interesting NPCs.
Well, thank you so much, Kurt. This has been a journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast, or YouTube, or feel free to save the RSS feed to use the app or player of your choice. Visit our website, sidekicksandsidequests.com, for links, write-ups of the NPCs, and to learn more about the show and the guests who have been on it. To stay up to date and interact via social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram/Threads, Twitter/X, and Reddit by searching for Side KQ Podcast. You can also find our small Discord community as well online. I would love to talk D&D and showcase your fan art, stories of how you used our NPCs, discussions, and commentary. And hey, if you'd like to hail the bard and send me a message, an email, you can do so by communicating with sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. To help this show be the resource it's meant to be, I ask that you leave a review on iTunes, 5 stars, please, to help spread the word and share our podcast with your friends and family. Whether you're a veteran player or an aspiring dungeon master, there's something here for everyone, and I want to hear about it. As mentioned in the NPC creations section of the podcast, I do in fact have a Patreon for Sidekicks and Sidequests. If you love this podcast and what we're trying to do here, I would appreciate it if you would just go to the website, patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. No matter your lifestyle expenses, we have wonderful rewards at every level of Patreon membership tier. Modest, comfortable, wealthy, and aristocratic accommodations await, and we welcome all patrons to the Levitating Platter. Seriously, your financial support allows for this passion project to continue to invest in itself through the tools that will take our production to the next level, as well as provide more content for our patrons and the community at large. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you can.
Sidekicks and Sidequests is unofficial fan content permitted under the fan content policy.
Meaning I'm not approved or endorsed by Wizards.
Portions of the materials used are property of Wizards of the Coast.
Copyright Wizards of the Coast.
LLC.
Thank you for your support, and I'll see you at the pub next time.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sidekicks and Sidequests.